episode of Beyond the Lecture, The Insights of Jacob Rey, where we dive into the intersection of economics, business, and social impact. I'm your host, Mary Lancaster, and we have Layla Faniel. And today we have the privilege of speaking with an esteemed guest who brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to our discussion. Our guest is Professor Jacob Rey, a distinguished college economics professor whose expertise extends far beyond the classroom. With a keen understanding of economic principles and their real-world applications, Professor Rey offers unique insights into the dynamic shaping of our business landscape and society at large. Throughout our conversation, we'll explore multiple topics from the fundamental economic indicators guiding business decisions to the profound implications of emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and blockchain. We'll also dive into the intricacies of managing risk in an uncertain economic environment and navigating income inequality. But our discussion doesn't stop there. Professor Rey brings a unique perspective to the table as not only an economics professor, but also an owner of a nonprofit organization. We'll uncover the intersection between economics and nonprofit management, exploring the challenges, successes, and the crucial role nonprofits play in addressing societal challenges. Whether you're a student aspiring to a career in economics, business, or nonprofit management, or simply intrigued by the dynamics shaping our world, this episode promises to be both informative and inspiring. So without further ado, let's dive into our conversation with Professor Rey as we unravel the economics behind business, social impact, and the future of our society.
How's everybody doing today?
Doing good.
Doing good? Yeah.
I want to dive right into it and ask you how your experiences were being a professor in China.
So going from the U.S. to China, I was actually expecting there to be a significant difference in what I saw in the students. I was expecting a lot of huge cultural differences, and not to say that there wasn't cultural difference, because there was a significant cultural difference, and we experienced culture shock too. My wife dealt with it much longer than I did, but I was fortunate to be able to go over there one time before her, and I think that helped a lot for me because I spent 2 weeks in China where I was offered the job initially. But what I ended up encountering was actually a lot more similarities than differences. And you get taught in school when you take like interpersonal communication classes, like a textbook's going to spend so much time telling you these are all the differences in the culture, these are all the different things that you need to do. And given there are some things that you need to know in business, like for instance, that when you go over and you meet with business people in China, if you get offered a cigarette, it's not offensive to turn it down, and they will offer it you more than once because they think you're being polite when you turn it down the first time. You actually have to turn it down usually 3 times, but it's not offensive to do that. So if you're ever over there and you get offered a cigarette, and obviously you don't want to be a smoker, and that's exactly what I didn't want to smoke any cigarettes, but you had to get used to doing that all the time. And in, of course, American culture, you're just like, yeah, I feel bad at that point, and it feels like pressure, but they're not trying to pressure you at that point. It's just, that's the normal culture. So you do have those differences. But as far as like on the teaching side, when I met the students, I still had to chase after students for late homework. I still had to push them to study. I still had to occasionally wake that student up in the back that happened to, fall asleep in class. So from a student perspective, it felt like very little changed. I mean, I had some people that were from different levels of incomes. So you saw that kind of a difference. So a lot of the students that were coming in were of an upper income level because it was a top 100 university that I was teaching at, so it wasn't exactly cheap to go there. And on top of that, where we were teaching, the tuition was triple the normal part of the university, so very, very expensive to get in there. There were students in there that were on scholarship that were of low income like you would expect here in the U.S. There was that, but it was definitely a very, very small portion of it. The other thing I noticed was a huge, I guess you could say, difference in the level the students were at coming into my classes. So I'd have students that were some of the most brilliant students I'd ever had. And they would, like, if they got a 97% on the midterm exam, they were arguing that score with me at the end of class. Like, we were going to fight over that. I remember getting to the end of it and just going, the textbook is the gospel. This is what the textbook says. So this is what we got to go from. And they finally, backed off on it. But they really, really cared about the grades. But a lot of those stereotypes you hear where it's like, well, people from Asia are good at math. No. I mean, there's people that are good at math. That's not what I'm saying at all. But they're not all good at math. It's just like us. There's a split up of we're all good at different things. So you could really see it throughout the entire classroom that there were different skill levels and all these different things. So, we have these assumptions that it's like, well, if they're not getting an A in math, they're in trouble. No, you talk to them, and it's like, no, that's not how my life was. I mean, so a lot in common, a lot of misconceptions that there are about like stereotypes and all that, which is with every culture, unfortunately, and things that we have to get off. And even though like them being good at math is what you'd consider more of like a positive one, where you'd think it's like, well, I wouldn't be angry if people thought, good of me. Well, if you're not good at math, it hurts. So it was actually that's something you got to consider when it's like, well, you're from Asia, you should already be good at math. Like, no, that's not necessarily true for them. So.
Oh, I think me and Mary both made a 97 on the midterm. We were high-fiving.
No, we were clapping and everything. And I think the math stereotype really comes from your background. Like, the background of Asian parents, they instill their children. They're like, okay, you're going to do extra math, extra this, just to be good at it. And so if you were instituted that as a child, that's the only reason you're actually good at math is because you have that practice. No one's just naturally good at math. You have to put that practice in to be good at it. And then, of course, everybody has a different interest, different aspects, different, someone's more artistic than more scientific,
And parents push different things. And that's true as much as here as America as it is over in China, too. So some of them are going to be pushing math. Some of them are going to be pushing other parts of STEM, like, the sciences. Others have parents that don't push anything, just like over here, where, education isn't the forefront of their parents' care. And then you see it in the students, too.
I wanted to backtrack a little bit. Could you state what degrees you have and what they're in?
So my first master's is in economics from the University of Detroit Mercy. And my second master's is a master's in business administration, so an MBA, and that's from Northwood University. And then I'm working on my PhD in public policy with a focus in economics at Liberty University. But I'm a good 2 to 3 years out from finishing that still.
So I was wondering, how did you get into academia? First place, did you go into these degrees thinking like, oh, I'm going to be a professor, or did that happen later?
So when I finished my bachelor's degree, my whole kind of like dream was to go into management, which I did. I went to work for Sears, so I got into management, and I wanted to gain experience of running a business and then combine that with my education and start my own company. That was my goal all through. And academia wasn't anything that was on my radar. I'd had multiple people tell me that I belonged in teaching. It happened when I was in supervisory at Kohl's. I remember her name was actually Trudy, and she sat me down. She was probably 20, 30 years older than me. And she goes, Jacob, you're really good at explaining things. Maybe you're in the wrong field. Like, maybe you should be going into, like teaching and stuff. And then she pushed really hard on that. And I just said, I'm scared of public speaking. I'm not going to be a teacher. It's not going to work out. It's just, I was like, no way. They're like, not going to do that. And I went into the workforce working for management in Sears, and I dealt with an abusive manager in there. And of course, that brought me back down into Detroit. And I was actually working on, if you've ever heard of the movie 8 Mile, that's where I worked. I literally worked in that area. They called it Vernier, and they renamed it Harper Woods to make it sound better. Oh, and what's funny is, like, everyone I knew, they're just, I told them that's where they're going, and like, oh. And then they didn't really tell me anything else. They just kind of like,
they gave you a signal like, this isn't the move.
Yeah. But I got out of Sears and I went into Aldi's, which was a step up. And I spent, even though technically I was fired from Sears, but I already had the job at Aldi's. So I just went right over. So there was like a 2-week in between. So I lucked out there because I could see everything, the writing on the wall and everything that was going to go on with there. Went over to Aldi's and I was doing really, really well. I'd gotten complimented by the vice president of the company. And then I found out I was going to be laid off after that. They had canceled the huge expansion that was going to be coming in. And of course, for me, it's a huge frustration. You worked hard to get up to that point. And fortunately, I'd gotten some advice from an uncle who had told me that, if you ever find yourself in this period where you're laid off, do something to better yourself. Treat every day like it's your job to get up and find a new job. And don't let things get you down, basically. So I started looking around of where I can go back to school, basically. At the time, I was running like a little photography business. And I was like, I can go to the community college that's basically in my backyard, take a photography class. And that's, it's just something to get me out of the, being down in the dumps and start improving myself like my uncle had asked. And I went over there and they had what was called the University Center at Macomb. And the University of Detroit Mercy was partnered with Macomb Community College, and you could take your master's degree classes there.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, well, this is kind of cool. And so I went and I talked to the director of the program there, and I said, hey, I have an interest in Austrian economics. Is that something that, that's going to be taught here? Can I write my thesis on it or anything like that? And he goes, well, do I have the news for you? And he goes, our whole program's that. So after I completed my master's in economics, I actually went in to get my MBA because I ended up getting offered a full ride over there. But I was still working in like management. I was actually in a factory job at that time. And then the original community college that I actually went to and started my whole collegiate career was called Delta College. And they called me out of the blue and they said, do you have any interest in teaching an economics course? We're kind of in a bind, basically, and it starts in just a few days. And they called me while I was at work, too. And it was pure luck I answered the phone. I normally would never answer the phone when I was working. And I said, okay. I just went for it, even though I was terrified of public speaking. And, like I still, like when I think back to it, I was like, wow, I did end up saying yes to that. And they handed me, a syllabus, and they said, go down to the bookstore and choose between the economics books you want to use that's already there, because obviously we can't order you a new one at this point. I chose one, and they said, yeah, good luck. And that's how I started. I actually started teaching. And I would actually shake in front of that class. I couldn't sleep, like, for the first day. It was actually 2 and 3 nights before, so I went like 2 days with no sleep before it because I was so scared of public speaking. But what I can say to anyone that is afraid of public speaking, you get over it. So your speech teachers and that are always telling you, well, practice to help you get over it. And then you do your practice and you're like, this did nothing for me. I was that same person in college. This is doing nothing. I hated the idea of doing any type of public speaking. But once you were doing it multiple times per week, you get over it. It doesn't go away completely because, you get me in front of a big crowd of 500 people and it comes up still. It goes away after I get started, but I'm still really nervous before. And I'm always nervous right before the start of a semester still, too. Like when I'm bringing a new class in, even if it's a bunch of students I already know, because in China, sometimes I had the exact same class coming back. So I know them already and still have that like first day jitters. But it was just, one of those fleeting moments where I took it. And when I look back and I go, okay, well, why did I want to stay a teacher? As well, for one thing, I found out that I loved it. But I thought back to what got me into economics in the first place, and that was that I saw this massive misunderstanding of economics in society. It doesn't matter where you go. It's over in China, it's over here in the US, and you listen to people speaking in other countries and Europe and stuff, and you hear it too. And economics has the capability, like if everyone understands it, we can destroy poverty. We can literally get rid of that. So by me being in academia, I can help teach people to understand this. And then when they move on and they make decisions in their careers, their jobs, or government, voting, and things like that, they'll understand it better and they'll know what those implications are of the things that they're doing. So there's a much better chance that we end up with a better society in the end. And then, of course, the other part of it is after I, started seeing the effect I had on students, that I was making a difference, it was huge for me. Like, I loved it. Like, I found out, I found kind of like my role finally. It's like I could make a difference in all these people's lives. And I can do it just by sharing stories and helping them understand concepts and things like that. And I loved it.
Of course, I've only taken your economics classes, so that's the only viewpoint that I could really talk from as far as seeing your passion for the subject. But of course, you have degrees in other business-related topics, and I was going to ask, like, how do you feel economic fares whenever it comes to other business majors like finance, accounting, management, marketing?
So
Yeah.
things have changed a lot since, so when I graduated, there wasn't a ton of competition in economics. So there's a lot less competition than if you come out with, say, like a general business degree. So if you were to graduate with a business administration and just management, for instance, you may struggle to find a job. Even if you go and you look at the statistics, I remember when I went into school, they said that when I got out, I was going to be making like $55,000 a year. It was going to be really easy for me to find a job. Well, I graduated, and it was very difficult to find a job. I was one of the lucky ones from my graduating class to get into a management position, something actually within my field of what I went for. And I was only making $32,000 a year. So nothing what the statistics told me. Now, that was a good income because you got to remember that's 2010. So $32,000, I was able to afford an apartment. And Erica was living with me at that point, and we were engaged. So I was able to afford to cover all those bills without her even working yet. She got a job eventually, shortly after we got down there, but I was the only one with the job originally because we moved for my job. So one thing I can say is that if you go into something more specific, like economics, your job prospects are going to be significantly larger. And you have to get into those in-demand fields. And economics is one of those in-demand fields right now. Accounting is one of those in-demand fields. Computer sciences is an in-demand field. So you have to go out there and actually look and say, okay, these are actually in demand. Talk to people that have got those degrees and go, okay, what's the income that I can like? Because sure, those statistics are going to say this is the average, but in the end, those are the averages. So that means there's people making more than that, and there's people that's making less than that, and the state and the area that you are going to make a big difference in that. So it does make a difference. But I can say when it comes to economics that there are countries that actually give it visa preference right now. So
Why is that?
It's because it's in such a shortage. There's not enough people with graduate level degrees in economics. Bachelor's, there's a lot more, but once you get up to like masters of economics or a PhD in economics, there's just not a lot of people in it. But if you want even more like openings, combine it with either data analytics, so do data analytics and economics, and you'll have a hard time with how many job selections you have at that point with that one, because that's like you're combining two fields at that point. And then another one that's in pretty high demand would be, financial economics. So, it's combining. Accounting is like a huge in demand field right now. So financial economics, though a difficult degree, I'm not going to say it's an easy one to get, but you're going to get the side that's going to have a bit of the data analytics in it. And these days, you're even going to be a computer programmer as an economist. Like, you need to know Python to get a really good job. So make sure when you're looking for a program in economics that you're either getting taught that or you get a certificate in it to go with it. Like, that's any of the big universities are going to ask you to have that to be a teacher even now. So that's something that changed in the past few years.
As a future accountant, I am so delighted to even come to the experience of, getting a finance internship. So to learn what is the difference between like financial accounting and let's just say like an auditor accounting.
So finance is going to be more on the side of where do we get the money, or it's going to be looking at the reports and then giving that information to your managers, like an explanation of like, what does this mean? Where are we going to go with this? And it's very broad, very broad. You can cover a lot of things. Generally, when I think financial accountant, I'm not thinking the one that's going to be doing necessarily the bookwork every single day. They're going to be more on the report side of things or finding the money and things like that. Auditor, on the other hand, is there to ensure that everyone is following the rules, that the numbers are actually accurate. So you're going to be diving into books and looking for issues.
Okay.
You're going to be looking at reports and making sure that everything matches. You're going to be making sure that the financial accountant or the other accountants are being honest. I mean, that's the whole thing. And sometimes, because there's internal auditors and then there's external auditors, so like your job can vary a little bit about that. But I think you probably save that one for the accountant.
Okay, that sounds great. Jumping into more of the economic level, what are the key economic indicators that businesses should monitor to anticipate changes in the business environment?
So one of the areas that a business area can, or an entrepreneur manager can actually watch that oftentimes kind of goes unwatched for the average person is the producer price index. So we spend so much focus on the consumer price index because the consumer price index is where we get our inflation figures from. And those are numbers you should be watching for because it's huge. It has an effect on, your employees. So the inflation rate is the price increases that they're facing. You're going to see those price increases affecting your consumers, and you're going to have to make decisions like, can I pass this on to my consumers and things like that? And I'll get into that in just a second. But the producer price index is often a good predictor of the consumer price index. So if prices for producers are going up, there's a good chance that means businesses are facing higher costs. And then those costs are going to end up getting passed on to the consumer. So if you watch the producer price index, you have a good idea of what's probably going to be coming in the future for consumers too. So you have basically a leg up on inflation is the best way to say it. So yes, you need to follow inflation, but if you know the producer price index, you may have a good idea of where inflation is going to go. Now, it's still guesswork because any of these indexes are always past information. So these are things you have to watch for. Gross domestic product and the growth rate of the economy can give you an idea of how healthy the economy is. So that's usually a good indicator to watch. One of my favorites to follow is actually like the yield curve, because oftentimes the yield curve has been a good predictor of what the stock market's going to do and the overall health of the economy. Like if you see an inversion in the yield curve, we can actually possibly expect economic issues, but it's not perfect. Again, these are just, patterns of what you're seeing. And when you get into like technical analysis and you're looking at like stock markets and things like that, what you're doing, it's your life. I mean, you're constantly looking at different patterns and basically hoping those patterns are going to happen again and then making your decisions based on that. And that's what you're doing in economics a lot too, is we're just looking at past data, comparing it to what we've seen before, and then trying to guess where things are going to go. And all we can do is make our best guess, because none of us are oracles. We're not going to be able to do that. So GDP, inflation, producer price index, and then unemployment rate is another good one, because that's another good indicator of what the economy is doing. Then you can get into all sorts of different indexes too that will give you kind of an idea of what's going on in the shipping world and things like that, like the Baltic Index, one that you can watch. You can go into the Baltic Index and see what the numbers are doing there. And it's basically another kind of along the lines of the producer price index, the PPI. But you'll get used to it. Like when you get into a company, you'll figure out where your industry is, and then there's going to be all the big overall indicators, but then you're going to want to find indicators that are very specific to your industry. So what are the sales of your industry? I mean, watch what your industry is doing and watch the trends specifically in your industry, and that's going to be really important information for you too. Now, going back to, how prices influence your customers, we have ways to take a guess at how sensitive your customers are to price changes. We call it the elasticity of demand. So if we understand the elasticity of demand, you understand that about your products, you have a good idea of whether you can actually pass, say, the cost of inflation onto your consumer. There's a lot of companies that don't really have that choice, so you're going to have to find ways to get around that, whether that's through shrinkflation, where you shrink the amount of product you give and hope that the consumer doesn't really notice that much and is willing to kind of take it on. Or we have to cut costs somewhere, or be innovative in our product and, make our product more advantageous for the consumer. So there's a lot of things we can watch in economics that's going to give us a good idea of what decisions we can make as a business owner, and hopefully make better decisions because of it.
That's phenomenal. Thank you for that information. Diving more into the artificial intelligence, what are the economic implications of emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence and blockchain for businesses?
So oftentimes when new technologies enter the market, we can go all the way back to like the 1800s, and we can look into the newspapers, and when a new technology comes out, you'll see the panic. It's like, all the jobs are going to be replaced, all the jobs are going to be gone. And you can see a little bit of it already happening again. Some of them are taking a more positive side of it. Like you have Elon Musk coming out and saying, well, the AI is going to replace all our jobs, but it's going to allow us to, take institute like universal basic income and all sit back and be more creative and things like that. But historically, that hasn't been the case. So historically, we have these new emergent technologies that come out, and they do replace some jobs, but they create a whole bunch of new ones. And that's what we're going to see. So obviously, we're seeing some very specific areas where artificial intelligence is coming in and it's doing incredible art. But it's not going to be the next Picasso, not at least with the way AI is now. So for artists that are of a lower skill level that haven't developed anything unique and things like that, they're going to struggle a lot more now. They can still get away with probably selling their art at things like conventions and all that, but on the online space, that's going to be tough. So you're going to see things like that shifting away. And then even computer programmers are now facing the reality that a significant amount of their code can be generated through AI, but it's still not doing it efficiently. It's giving spaghetti code is a good way to put it. The program may work when it comes out, but it doesn't run all that great. So you still need somebody that's going to go in there and actually fix it and make it better. And then, of course, if we want to develop new codes or better ways to do the existing codes, it's not going to come from AI right now. So how you can prepare for AI in your careers is mess with it. Go and learn what you can do with it. Understand, go watch some videos on like input engineering, for instance, because input engineering is going to help you get better responses. Because a lot of times people are coming out that are saying, AI is useless or AI gives me like junk or whatever. It's because of what they're inputting to it. That's not necessarily the AI itself is the issue. So you can give AI a persona, for instance. If you give AI a persona, it greatly increases your chance of getting a better answer. AI is a tool that's going to supplement progress, and that's the way it's got to be thought of. You can't fear it. It's kind of scary to think about it because it's a new thing. But when the first machines that came out to make automotive production faster, that was scary too. When robots started getting a lot bigger, that was scary too for a lot of people. But in the end, we have to adopt these new things because it's going to make our lives all better. It's human progress, and we learn how to use it, implement it, and you're going to end up being the one that has the advantage when you go and apply for the jobs. So it's something like 90% of jobs or something like that are asking, do you have any experience with AI? And that's going to give you a leg up in that job market. So it's not necessarily, taking a college course, because I know even those are going to be kind of tougher to kind of line up with what you're doing. So it's going to be a lot of self-exploration at this point, self-study, and then using it. And then if you have jobs and internships and things like that now, find ways to make your life easier in those internships too, because then you can put that on your resume and say, I've done this, I have this experience, and you'll get the leg up on people.
Yeah, I've learned that AI intelligence on your resume does really give you a leg up. And then I think of the perspective as a professor. Do you worry that your students are using AI to cheat on their economics exams or use it, let's just say, for discussion boards? What do you think of that?
They're definitely using it. It shows up. There's
Not
not
us.
Not so. Us, we would never.
there's not a great way, because if you use the checkers that are out there that exist that tell you that X amount percentage is AI, it's got too many false positives, so it's catching innocent people, and so I don't use it at all. And the way I look at it at this point, and obviously I'm changing the way my program's done, and I'm adjusting to it, and I can tell you already next year there's going to be AI assignments in almost all my classes. It's just we had to adjust. We had to adopt to prepare all of you for AI, but also I had to basically go in and make it so that people can't just use AI to do all my answers. Now, some of them, it's very difficult to do AI with. Like, it still struggles with my Commanding Heights worksheet, my macroeconomics course. It still struggles with anything that isn't mainstream economics. If it isn't mainstream, it's almost always getting it wrong right now. Like, if I've got questions about like Standard Oil, for instance, and if you go into AI and you ask it to write that essay question, I'm gonna know because it shows up as total mainstream and everything that both our authors said was wrong that we have in the class, and the articles also say. So now the real trick is if you have an AI that you pay for that actually has access to the internet, like ChatGPT 4. I probably shouldn't be saying this, but you can
Write this down.
What?
you can tell it to access that information to give you the answer. And that's where my struggle is now. So the people that really know how to use the AI can still get around it, but you can feel it. You can really feel it because there's a huge change in the way. So if you've had a student that spoke a certain way through their essay questions and their answers, and all of a sudden you get this upper level English you've never seen from them before, you're just like, what that used to mean was plagiarism. Because you just go and you take the first line, put it into Google, and it's like, oh, there's where they got it. And then they get their 0 and you're done. But now it's mostly AI, but it's like that. So it is a struggle in the academia world. But I can say to any of the teachers that are out there listening to it, you're just going to have to find ways to adapt. And you can't just single out and make claims against a student. Even when you think you are really close to 100%, there's still a chance that it's not. So you're just going to have to find ways to actually make students adapt and find ways to kind of future-proof your projects.
Thank you so much. After that, I would like to move on to your life and advices.
Yeah. So, of course, being your students, again, we hear about your upbringing, and you touched on it actually earlier in the podcast. You I think you said you like worked in like the real deal 8 Mile, and if you're watching it and you don't know, this is basically the embodiment of if Eminem went to university. So growing up in a rougher side of Detroit and having plenty of bad influences around you, what were the main contributors to your success? Why were you able to get out of that? And what made you work hard, and what made you strive for better in your life whenever, like, I've heard the stories, they're crazy.
Yeah, we hear them every day in class. It's
either 8 Mile or China.
China. Yeah. Either way.
Well, where I grew up as a kid wasn't 8 Mile, fortunately. So I was more in a little bit of the suburbs. It's called Clinton Township. And obviously there's been the issues, which they've heard a lot of the stories about the area I grew up with, and how you had to make sure you were traveling with people, for instance, to stay safe. And when your friends were messed with by other groups, you had to stand up against them. It was like, the show of strength. And unfortunately, I have to admit sometimes that led to fights that didn't necessarily win either. But
can you imagine Jacob Rey in a fight?
Yeah, completely. Like, I am very much to like avoid it at all costs. And I can say, even when I was younger, that was already part of my personality. And I look back and I was disappointed with myself, but at the same time, it's like this, like I'm alive. Like my parent, like we're all safe now because we did these kind of things. And I still like my older brother. I remember watching like him come home with weird injuries and things like that, and he never spoke about it. I still don't know what a lot of those are till this today, but I understand. I totally understand where it comes from.
It's like the unspoken. You're like,
yeah, it's just like, oh well, sorry, but I did have teachers that were like good influences through my life growing up, even as early as elementary school. There were parents of friends that they never asked what was wrong, but you could tell that they understood and they were supportive. And to this day, I still don't necessarily know if my parents understood exactly, the things I was going through. They always trusted me, so like they always assumed the best of me because I was mostly a student even when I was going through a lot of this. And I can say when you're going through those, obviously as a kid, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to give you advice as a really young kid, but I can say that I never really let it get me down. I always kept my friends close, even if my friends weren't necessarily the best influence. They you've got to, a lot of times you'll find yourself being in that position where you have to be the friend that has to have the brains. And I was definitely that person constantly in our friend groups. Like, do we really need to go do that? Do we really need that? No, we don't. And so we avoided a lot of conflict, and I still wish that I had avoided more. But regardless, the biggest thing was getting away from that. So my parents, I think, the main reason they wanted to go is because a lot of family had moved north and stuff. But regardless, they got us out of there. And though I was miserable at first because I lost all my friends and all that kind of stuff, and you make new friends and all that. And getting out of that area was huge. And getting away from that group and having to be in that situation was very, very big for me. And I know that's not the option that's going to be there for you. I can say to parents that can do it if you can. But I know income and job opportunities are going to have that, and all you can do is do everything you can do to support that particular student. Make sure that they continue to do their best that they can in that particular school, even if that school isn't necessarily the best school in there. Strive to just keep getting through it, because the way I've always looked at life is that it's only going to get better. Like I've always, there's the light at the end of the tunnel. You always have something to look forward to, always things to work forward, focus on those dreams you have. And those dreams may change over, like, I didn't want to be a teacher. That's where I ended up. So, I started like little businesses in like third grade and stuff. So I always thought I was just going to be a business owner. And that's
reminded. Sorry,
but that's kind of where that all started for me. But when the job came back, I had to move back to Detroit because that's where my job was. And then I was actually in a worse part of Detroit than where I grew up in. I mean, there were shootings happening at my work. There was fights, gang fights, and things like that. Lowe's had armed guards out front, and more than one of them. It's like a whole other world. And obviously, I was numb to it already when I came in, because like, though I didn't grow up around it being that bad. Like I got in there, it's like, this is my job, this is what I got to do, and I'm going to get through it. And that's what I continued to do, because I knew if as long as I had my income, my fiance at the time, her life's going to continue, my life's going to get in. This was a stepping stone, is the way I looked at it. And the abusive boss, of course, that made it even harder. But you put up with it and you continue. Like as soon as I found out that he was the issue, my job applications started going out, and it takes a while to get out of it. That's the thing you got to do, is when you get into those bad situations, there are ways out, and we all look at it and go, it's like, well, I put out 100 job applications and, I haven't heard anything. It's discouraging. And it's so much work to put those job applications out, but you got to keep at it. Because if you don't keep at it, then you may be stuck in that situation. And, if you're someone like me that, when you see that boss doing it to other things and you step in, you're going to be taking on a bigger brunt of that too. Because I always, like when I saw him yelling at, my subordinates or other employees at the store, I was like, come on, we're going to, let's go back to the office. You can take it out on me. And that was my daily day. I mean, it's like just getting screamed at by the store manager. So, but eventually I got out of that. And fortunately for those people, the store actually closed. And all those people, I've kept in contact with them, and they're all in better situations now. Those that I could make recommendations for and help them I helped them get out. I actually watched them all fall apart around me while I was there, because there more and more stores were closing, and the sign would just be on the front, "Closed for the safety of our workers." It was just eye-opening, that kind of stuff. But good on those companies, because every single one of those companies found those people's jobs to get to. Unfortunately, I'd imagine some couldn't take the new jobs that were offered because, the distance that they had to drive or whatever, because God knows a lot of those people were in really, really low income situations. But there goes back to my, academia thing. It's like where I want to help those people get out of that pit of despair that's really hard to build out of.
You reminded me, whenever I was in elementary school, I would go to Costco or Sam's with my mom and my aunt, and I would buy those bulk things of candy bars, and I had employees, and I would give them the candy bars, and they would go sell it, and they would bring yeah. So
this was like you playing toys?
No, this was elementary school. I was selling candy bars.
Oh, you an entrepreneur?
Yeah, and then I sold the Bath and Body Works Germexes. So I was wondering what little business were you running?
The first thing we did in third grade, so I was super into weather and tornadoes when I was in third grade, and our library had no books on it. And obviously we didn't have access to the internet, so I couldn't just go watch YouTube videos or something like that to scratch that itch. So I went to the librarian and said, well, what if I run a fundraiser and I get the money so we can buy these books for the library? Like, yeah, sure. And I got a group of other students together, and we made homemade bookmarks. What we did, and we sold them at 5 cents a piece. It was a ridiculously small amount, but we still managed to raise $40. So you can do the math. We sold a lot of bookmarks, and we did that multiple. It became a normal thing every year at the school. I don't know if they still do it today, but they did the whole time while I was there. And then I stole stickers, in front of, I did a little cart in front of my house, and I sold stickers. Didn't make much money doing that, but and then snow shoveling was the other thing I did with friends.
Snow shoveling?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, no.
Luckily, never
That's not that. I used to live in Oklahoma, and we would get 6 inches of snow, and we couldn't drive through. And I remember the one of my chores every morning was make sure you do the lawn, make sure you sweep all the snow. No.
That's all I had. If that's all you had, Mary. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Thank you all so
Bye,
much for
guys.
listening. We really appreciate it. We'll be coming back for a second episode.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here.